Welcome back to The World This Week with me, Jonathan Steele. An extreme right-wing group which uses Nazi salutes is promising to clean Greece of what it calls the stench of immigrants. Disturbing stuff. But what is perhaps more shocking is the fact that Golden Dawn now has seats in the Greek parliament. The Greek government has been accused of not doing enough to tackle far-right violence. But just over a week ago, the leader of the Greek opposition went further, saying the government itself was the most right-wing and extreme government in modern Greek history. Let's take a look at this report.
This Athens railway station was not the only place that ground to a standstill in Greece on Wednesday. Public and private sector workers across the country failed to turn up to their desks in a general strike against cuts to pensions and wages. The cuts are the latest in a series of painful austerity measures which have caused anger among the Greek population, which has the highest unemployment rate in the European Union. But the country's acute economic crisis has brought with it another challenge: the rise of the extreme right. This is Golden Dawn, an ultra-nationalist group that now has a significant presence in Greek parliament after taking 7% of the vote last year. The party, widely described as neo-fascist, certainly makes no bones about its views on immigrants.
Δεν φοβόμαστε τίποτε. Θα του πω μια ρίση ενός Έλληνα.
Some of these Muslims living in Athens feel the rise in racism in Greece is making them second-class citizens. The Greek capital doesn't have a single official mosque, leaving many Muslims to pray in cramped spaces like this basement. According to some here, property owners are refusing to rent them more prominent spaces for fear of reprisals, following several racist attacks in recent months, which some accuse Golden Dawn of instigating. The party denies any involvement in racist violence.
Μπορούμε να νοικιάσουμε ένα πιο ωραίο πάνω στη γη, στο φως. Δεν μας νοικιάζουν τώρα πια με την άνοδο της ακροδεξιάς, με το ρατσισμό. Ο διοκτήτης φοβάται να μας νοικιάζει σπίτι ή να μας νοικιάζει μεγάλο χώρο.
Among those addressing the striking workers on Wednesday was the far-left opposition leader, Alexis Tsipras. He sparked controversy recently when he accused the Greek government of collaborating with the far right and deliberately stoking anti-immigrant feeling. His comments come after a senior police officer claimed that Golden Dawn were infiltrating the Greek police force. The Greek police denied the allegations and said unlawful behaviour within the force would not be tolerated. Emily Churchill, Islam Channel.
Well, with me to discuss these accusations, I'm pleased to welcome Yiannis Baboulias, a Greek investigative journalist, and Dr. Sofia Vasilopoulou, a lecturer in politics at the University of York. And joining us by telephone from Athens is Stamou from the Muslim Association of Greece. Let me turn to you first of all, Sofia Vasilopoulou. Do you take these accusations seriously? Is this government trying to stoke and work with the far right?
I wouldn't really. I find this a bit of a sweeping statement, really, made for clear political reasons. And I would think that it is unfair to say that the current government is the most right-wing government of all times. First of all, let's not forget that this is a coalition government, and 2 out of the 3 partners in the coalitions are actually the center-left, PASOK, and a fairly centrist Dimar as a third member. The one thing I would say about the current government, but also for governments in Greece in the past, is that they have been unable to enforce the rule of law. And this is one of the reasons why we do see these parties and its members being on the, and its MPs being elected.
Why haven't they been able to enforce the rule of law?
That is a good question, actually. This has been problematic in Greece for years. There is a number of members of the Golden Dawn and MPs of the Golden Dawn have criminal records, the majority of them, and these are pending trial for a number of years. There have been issues with the judiciary system. It's just a system that takes a very long time. If for many, for some reasons, someone is not tried because they are ill, for instance, this would be postponed for 1, 2, or even 3 years. So it's a general problem with the rule of law that unfortunately means that some of these people remain untried.
Well, Yiannis Baboulias, let me turn to you. I mean, Why did Alexis Tsipras make these comments? I mean, isn't he just trying to polarize the political scene even more than it is already?
The problem with this is that there is actually a point to saying that this is the most extreme government we've seen in Greece recently. I think he was talking about after the dictatorship, not actually ever, because of course we've had more extreme governments. What he's talking about is that this government has elements in it, like, for instance, the ex-Golden Dawn guy, Makis Voridis, who was a minister under the previous coalition government, that pursue what appears to be a far-right agenda, especially when it comes to what they perceive as law and order. And they've adopted a very, how can you say, tough stance on immigration with Operation Xenios Zevs, on squads and on social movements that have attempted to organize and help in many occasions. Also, the impunity that the Golden Dawn seems to enjoy sometimes in terms of how the police handles the cases they're involved in gives him ground to say that. It is a polarizing comment, but I don't think it's an unfair one, because compared to what we're used to, these more centrist, liberal, or even socialist governments, this government is indeed the most right-wing, the most purely right-wing government we've seen, both in financial and social policies.
Well, one of the issues that we heard about in the video clip at the beginning was the pressures being put on Muslims in Greece and the difficulty even to build a mosque. I mean, has Tsipras been progressive on this issue? Has he made any steps to try and improve that for Muslims in Greece?
From what I recall, Syriza has always been towards building mosques and generally helping religions be autonomous and have their own religious spaces in Athens and in other cities in Greece. I think they're very clear on that for years now.
Anna Stamou, I'd like to bring you in now on the telephone from Athens. What is your experience of the left-wing party, Syriza, Alexis Tsipras' party? Have they really shown themselves to be any different from any of the other established parties in Greece?
I want you to repeat because the line is not very nice. How about Tsipras?
Well, I wanted to ask you about Syriza, the left-wing party, particularly, which is a sort of very new party on the scene and progressive, it calls itself. Would you say that they have shown any greater tolerance towards Muslims, any greater effort to give equal rights and to strengthen equal rights for Muslims than the established political parties like New Democracy and PASOK and so on?
Listen, we are living here in Greece in a new situation because we all underestimated the power that the Golden Dawn would eventually take, because we did not bet on the political failure of the system that brought the Golden Dawn inside the parliament. What we are facing now is the rage of the people who saw their fortunes being destroyed and the whole political system failing. So the people lost their faith to the political system and the politicians, and so they're thinking they're revenging this by voting for Golden Dawn. What brought us is an upside down, and we really are now in a very liquid soil. Both Muslims and non-Muslims, you know, the Greek society is merely Orthodox community, but of course you have to understand that the weakest links of the society are the immigrants, and the weakest social groups are mostly affected. What we see now here is that this coalition government is being, I would say, comforted by the presence of the Golden Dawn as to our point of view, because they can pass more easily the austerity measures they are ordered to pass. So they have this threats in the political system, and to push the left parties and the social groups to back off, because they have the threat of the Golden Dawn that might rise even more.
But what about the other? I mean, they could the left parties could try and appease the right wing by following their line, or they could oppose it and confront it. Do you see that Syriza and the left have rarely tried to confront this racism from Golden Dawn and this anti-Islamic feeling from those people?
You know, the left parties are always were supporting all kinds of groups on the basis of the equal human rights, and they're always supporting the fair causes. But as I see now, all this media war against the left parties has weakened the opposition parties of the government, because as Mrs. Vasilopoulou very well said, that this is a coalition government that is consisted by middle groups and right groups and left groups, so they have all range of the political phasma. That means that Syriza and Alexis Tsipras now is weaker by this propaganda and media that is bringing him weaker. So they're doing efforts, but every time I think they're propagating this against. And what we have here is not an actual confrontation of the extreme right phenomenon. So the extreme right see this gap, and they eventually invade in the system. That is why now they're so strong.
Let me come back to you, Sofia Vasilopoulou.
Okay.
I mean, on the economic front, Greece appears to be doing much better than a year ago. I mean, is the government becoming more popular as a result of that?
Well, I wouldn't say it's becoming more popular, but it's certainly more popular than the opposition party at the moment. But I would like to come back to one of the points made about basically the Golden Dawn and the rights of immigrants and ethnic minorities in Greece and so on. And I would say that in Greece we have a culture of intolerance that is deeply ingrained in our everyday lives. And let us not forget that the majority of governments since the end of dictatorship have been left-wing or center-left governments. However, even throughout those governments, we haven't really seen any substantive improvement of immigrant rights, their civil rights, and so on. Therefore, I would refrain from saying that this is the most right-wing government. I think it's a very nice tactic. It's not something nice to say, and it appeals to many people. However, substantively, no government throughout the past 20, 30 years have done something substantive, be it in terms of the rights, the religious rights, be it in terms of their integration in our society. We haven't really seen much difference. Now we have the rise of the Golden Dawn. Obviously, there has been some fertile ground for this.
Well, how easy is it for people to emigrate into Greece? I mean, are they trying to block the numbers of people coming in? Is that one of the tactics of the government?
They are, and they're having some success at it. I mean, especially in Evros, the river that is actually the border between Greece and Turkey. They've had some success, especially after Frontex started operating in the area. But that has only pushed the immigration flow down in the Aegean Sea, where you have boats of 50, 60 immigrants just landing on the nearest islands to Turkey every day. We have about, I think, the last time I checked, the stats was 350 people per day trying to cross the borders.
Coming from where mainly?
Mainly, this we're not sure. It's now, of course, it's North Africa, Syria. It's basically wherever there's conflict, there's the flow seems to switch to that area. For instance, now we have a lot of people coming in from Syria. I don't know if you watched Paul Mason's recent documentary on the BBC. It was 2 days ago. About if you saw how many people he talked to, most of them were actually from Syria, and most of them were, you would hear all these names like Aleppo or all these places that have seen terrifying conflict, and you see that it switches depending on where there's conflict and when there's trouble. But I need to come back to something else. Greece is not financially better off. This is completely unfounded by the government. I know that they've been saying that since January, but they're not actually. Greece is going to have one of the worst years since the start of the crisis. Most statistics now predict that within 2013, more than 50% of Greeks will be unable to pay their tax bills. We went through a winter where very few people could afford to buy to pay for their heating. I don't see how they think it's better. I don't think we are better off, and this is going to have a direct thing on immigration as well. It's going to get much worse for immigrants and for the Golden Dawn as well. They're going to become stronger, I think.
Well, it's getting better only in the sense that it's not so indebted as it was. It's beginning to pay back its debts and so on. But what is happening in terms of growth? Is it still expected that this year there'll be negative growth?
Well, that's right. However, there is a feeling that we have escaped the whole crisis problem of exiting the Eurozone and so on. We do not know what's going to happen in the next couple of years, but there are some signs that things are getting better, and there are some signs from our European counterparts of some increasing faith in the Greek political system, and B, the Greek markets. I would like to come back to the issue of immigration, if I may. And there's been quite a lot of people saying that it's because of high levels of immigration that we have experienced in the past few years that we see the rise of the Golden Dawn. And I would like to remind people that actually this is not the case. Why? Because Greece has been experiencing very high levels of immigration as a percentage of its population since the collapse of the USSR, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and crucially, most crucially, the dissolution of the former of Yugoslavia. So we have a massive influx, as it were, of immigration since the 90s. However, we did not see the rise of the Golden Dawn in the 90s, despite the fact that it did actually exist at the time and it was operational. Therefore, I would refrain from making a causal link between high levels of immigration and rise of an extremist party. And I would like to add to that we have seen the rise of far-right politics in Greece since the beginning of the 2000s in a form of a different party called the Popular Orthodox Rally, which actually obtained a few seats, I believe it was 15, in the 2009 Greek elections. Obviously, that party does not come with the baggage of National Socialism and violence, but its views were fairly extremist, very anti-immigrant, and people voted for them. Therefore, I would not see the Golden Dawn now as a surprise. It was something was there already. People had specific views already, but now they just, everything become a bit more extreme, I would say.
Anna Stamou, okay, let's come back to you, if I may. Obviously, the fact that Golden Dawn is in the Greek Parliament is not encouraging for you, and racist statements being made by politicians are not encouraging either. But in terms of practical life, in day-to-day life, is there actually an increase in violence, let's say, against Muslims and against immigrants in general, or is it just people feel nervous, but at the moment there is no real violence against them?
No, certainly it has changed, but we have to see the big picture. Now we see some young gangs of not adults that are getting pocket money to stab some immigrants. And they don't. They choose the nationalities, and they don't attack the Arabs, for example. They are very, very careful to check the nationalities. They attack now the Pakistani and the Bangladesh because their guideline is not to attack the Arabs right now. But we have the everyday violence, and the worst thing is the justification of all this. And you know what? Greece had never drawn a never an immigrant policy. It is a victim of trafficking, yes, and this wave of immigrants really was a real problem because we never had a policy, an immigrant policy. But all this, the immigrants even, is an excuse for the extreme right and the Golden Dawn to rise. So what we see is some actions of power and a lot of money distributing. I wonder where they get their money from, because suddenly a political group of 0.2 now have all this money to make all these attacks and these gangs and this. We have some organized attacks against immigrants and some hotline maybe where somebody has an immigrant to hit, so they call the Golden Dawn hotline and they have a strike. We live in a society that is starting to absorbing and tolerating the hatred. Maybe they do not approve, we do not approve, but we live every day with this, and this is like watering us with all this hatred. And yes, we have incidents. The immigrants are not afraid, but I want to tell you what, the salaries have dropped down very much. But an immigrant can bear and live in Greece with a lower salary, but cannot live with the hatred. So what they do, the Syrians, for example, that you referred, they start going, all of them are going to the North Europe, the Scandinavian countries, for example, because they cannot tolerate the hatred. The hatred is what affects, not the political crisis, because all these people that are coming from poorer countries, they can live with lower salaries, but not with all this hatred that started to circulate in the air. This is what really changed. And when Golden Dawn falls, what will remain? This is our issue.
That is your big worry. Well, let me come to you, Yiannis Baboulias. We're running a little bit out of time. Do you think that there will be an election again soon, and will the far left have a chance to strengthen itself, and will there be an opportunity to confront Golden Dawn, or do you think they might increase again if there's a new election?
I think the Golden Dawn, at least if you look at the polls, has pretty much stabilized at 10%. If we had elections right now, probably the coalition government would collapse, because PASOK has a good chance of not entering the parliament. The MAR has lost votes, and New Democracy and Syriza are at a margin of 1%. One's leading with 1% and the other one is leading with 1%.
What about the Syriza? How well are they doing?
They've pretty much stabilized as well. At
what percent?
Was it 21? I think it was 21. I think and they go down from 20.5 to 21.5.
So they could end up as the largest party in the next election if there was one.
They could, and especially if they find allies in other parties, they could find themselves forming a coalition government, of course. And they've moved towards a more centrist agenda, if we want to be honest. They're not that far left in their politics anymore, but still they're way off to the left of New Democracy. Well,
we'll I'm sure come back to this subject in the future. We've run out of time, so let me just thank Anna Stamou in Athens for joining us again, and Yiannis Baboulias and Dr. Sofia Vasilopoulou. Thank you very much. I'm Jonathan Steele, and thank you for watching, and we'll be back again next week. Good night.